All right, so how are product teams really using AI? Like right now, today? There's so much noise out there, but a brand new report from Excel actually gives us the ground truth. It cuts through all the headlines to show what's really happening. And honestly, some of these findings, they might just change how you think about AI in your own team. And okay, the very first number from this report really sets the stage. Get this. A massive 70% of product teams are already using AI in their day-to-day work. So yeah, this isn't some far-off trend we need to get ready for. It's here. It's the reality on the ground right now. So, okay, 70% of teams are using it. But what does that actually get you? Well, the report found it translates into a huge efficiency gain. We're talking an average of 6 hours saved per person every single week. I mean, think about that. That's a massive deal for any team's capacity. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at why AI is pretty much the new normal. Then, we'll dive into this really interesting problem the report calls the Great Enablement Gap. After that, we'll climb something called the adoption ladder to see where teams are at. And finally, we'll connect it all back to unlocking the real gains. All right, let's jump into part one. AI is the new normal. You know those first two numbers we saw, 70% adoption, 6 hours saved? They weren't just flukes. They're basically proof that AI has officially graduated from being some niche experiment to a core must-have part of the modern product toolkit. And just so we're clear, this isn't based on a hunch or a small focus group. The data here is super solid. It's from a global survey by Excel that talked to almost 3,000 professionals from over 1,000 different companies. So yeah, we're not talking about a tiny sample size here. This is a really definitive look at the whole landscape. Okay, so if adoption is already so high, then everything's perfect, right? Well, not quite. And this brings us to what's really the core tension of this entire report. It's this huge disconnect that the authors call the Great Enablement Gap. Basically, it's the giant space between everyone knowing AI is important and companies actually helping their people use it well. And here's that gap in black and white. Look at this. A staggering 82% of people say that AI skills are important for their job. But the reality? Only 33%, just one-third of them, are actually getting any kind of formal training from their company. That, right there, is the disconnect we're talking about. You know, the report just sums it up so perfectly with this one line. Adoption is rising, enablement is not. It's that simple. People are jumping in and using the tools, but the companies themselves, they aren't building the skills, the rules, or the support systems to make sure that adoption is actually successful and, safe. So to help us understand this gap a little better, the report introduces this really brilliant framework they call the adoption ladder. Think of it as a super simple way to figure out how mature your team's AI use is and, to see where you might stand on that path from just being curious to full-on integration. It's pretty straightforward. It's got 4 rungs. First up is curious, where there's interest but not much impact yet. Then you move to exploring, where teams are actually trying things out, maybe running some pilots. The third step is scaling, and that's when AI is part of live workflows. And the top of the ladder is embedded, where AI is just deeply woven into how the team works every day. So the big question is, where are most teams on this ladder right now? The answer might actually surprise you. The vast majority, we're talking a full 70%, are already in those high adoption stages, scaling and embedded. That bottom curious stage, it's tiny. This is huge. It tells us that live, daily use of AI is now officially the norm, not the exception. Now, it probably won't surprise you that company size plays a really big role here. While small teams are definitely getting on board, it's the big enterprises that are really leading the charge. A full 80% of them are in that high adoption zone. And, it makes sense, right? They've got the budgets, the resources, the structure to roll out new tech at scale. And we see a pretty similar story when we look across different industries. You've got your tech-forward sectors like SaaS way out in front, over 90% high adoption there. But then you look at more regulated areas like the public sector, and they're lagging behind. The report makes a great point here. It's not because they aren't interested. It's because of all the friction from regulations and, dealing with older systems. Okay, and all of this brings us to our final and I think most important section, unlocking the real gains. Because, okay, you climb this adoption ladder, so what? What's the actual payoff? Let's connect the dots between getting more mature with AI and the actual impact it has. Well, the payoff is crystal clear. The data shows a direct line. As teams move up that adoption ladder, their own reported productivity score just climbs and climbs with every single step. By the time a team gets to that embedded stage, they feel way more productive. And this isn't just a vague feeling of being productive. It translates directly into cold, hard time. Check this out. Teams at the curious stage save less than 3 hours a week. But once they're fully embedded, that number more than doubles, jumping to almost 6 hours. So yeah, moving up that ladder literally doubles the time you get back each week. And this quote from a senior product designer really just brings all that data to life. It's not just about saving time for the sake of it. It's about taking the hours you used to spend on tedious stuff, like research and idea checks, and moving that time to higher value work. And that doesn't just boost productivity, it actually improves the quality of what you're building. So what's the secret sauce? What really separates the teams at the top of the ladder from the ones at the bottom? Well, a huge factor is leadership. In those high adoption companies, execs are named as the main drivers almost 3 times more often. Meanwhile, in the low adoption teams, it's way more likely to be just a grassroots thing bubbling up from the bottom with no clear person in charge. And when we look at what's holding teams back from climbing that ladder, it all comes right back to that enablement gap we talked about. The number one blocker, it's not budget, it's not a lack of tools, it's a lack of formal training. Right behind that is unclear legal guidance. The biggest hurdles aren't about the tech, they're about the people, the skills, and the rules. Which brings us to the core takeaway of this entire report, really. If you want to get the most out of AI, it's not about just buying the latest tool. It's about something much more fundamental. It's about turning those scattered individual wins into a practice that's repeatable and scalable for everyone. And to do that, you need to intentionally invest in 3 things: skills, rules, and leadership. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Remember that number from the beginning, 6 hours saved per week? Well, if you do the math, that adds up to roughly an entire extra working month per person per year, an extra month. So the real question isn't if AI can help. The question is, when your team gets that extra month back, what are you going to build with it?